I started my job as a foreman at an abandoned warehouse zone a few weeks ago. I was excited. I had worked in construction for over a decade. I knew how to run a crew and keep things safe. The site felt different right from the start. It was eerie. The rusting framework loomed over us like a ghost, but I tried to shake off the feeling. On my first day, I met my crew. They seemed nervous, but I thought it was just because the site was such a dump. I gathered everyone around to review the blueprints. That's when something caught my eye. The blueprints had strange markings, little symbols scribbled in the corners. I pointed them out and my crew exchanged worried glances. One guy, Mark, spoke up. "I don't like this place. I feel like we shouldn't be here." I smiled, trying to ease his worry. "It's just an old site. We'll be fine." That night I heard a noise. A bang echoed through the warehouse. I walked through the dark, but I didn't see anything. My heart raced. I chalked it up to the old building settling. As the week went on, things got weirder. Tools started disappearing. First it was a hammer, then a saw. I asked my crew if they had seen them. They shrugged. "Maybe it's a ghost," one joked, but no one laughed. We kept working, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, while cleaning up, I heard scratching sounds coming from the shadows. I froze. It was like something was moving behind the walls. I couldn't see anything. I felt uneasy. I turned to my crew. They looked pale and wide-eyed. Then, during lunch the next day, one of the guys pointed out a ladder that had been used but wasn't leaning against anything. "Who put that there?" he asked. I didn't know, but it unsettled me. I decided to investigate the noise I had heard earlier. I followed the sound until I found a door hidden behind some old crates. It creaked as I swung it open. Inside, the room was filled with strange objects, old toys, rusted tools, and drawings that didn't make sense. I felt my stomach twist. One drawing showed the warehouse, but the blueprints looked even stranger. I was in a cold sweat as I reached out and touched a broken doll. The eyes seemed to follow me. I stumbled back and something rattled behind me. My crew's uneasy whispers grew louder. I could hear them arguing. "Let's just get out of here," someone said. I felt the fear wrap around me, tight and suffocating. I left the hidden room, locking the door behind me. I wanted to tell my team, but when I turned around, they were all standing about 10 feet away, staring at me. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. That night I lay awake in my tent, listening to the warehouse whispering in the darkness. I wondered if I was really losing my mind, or if something darker was lurking behind the walls. My heart beat loud in my chest. The place never felt safe again, and even today I can't shake the feeling that it's not just an old construction site. The next morning I woke with an uneasy feeling. I couldn't shake the images from the hidden room. The drawings haunted me. I stood outside the warehouse, staring into the shadows. My crew was already gathered, looking lost and tired. It was like they hadn't slept at all. "Are we really going back in there?" Mark asked, his voice shaky. I wanted to say it would be okay. I wanted to believe it, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. We had work to do, and I pushed forward, trying to maintain some semblance of control. As we set up for the day, I noticed that some equipment had been moved. The ladder we had pointed out yesterday was back, propped against the wall as if it had never left. Another uneasiness settled in my stomach. I remember hearing my crew whispering as we worked. "Something's not right," I heard one say. They were all hesitant around me, eyes darting nervously as if they sensed something I couldn't. In the afternoon, I found myself alone, checking the storage area. I thought I heard voices, muffled and faint, drifting through the maze of crates. I froze, straining to listen. The sound faded almost as quickly as it had arrived. Was it just my imagination? Was I losing it too? Trying to shake off the worry, I pushed deeper into the storage area. That's when I saw it. A toy robot, one that looked just like the broken doll from the hidden room. Strange, dusty, and inexplicably out of place. I picked it up, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Then I spotted a small note sticking out from underneath it. "They don't like it when you're here." My hands trembled as I read the words. I felt the air grow heavy around me. I quickly placed the robot back down and hurried out of the storage area. I needed to find my crew. I found them in a huddle, their whispers rising again as I approached. Something in their faces told me they had seen or heard something too. "Did you feel that?" another guy, Tom, asked, looking pale. "Like the building was alive?" I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to say it was just the stress of the sight. But the echoing voices, the felt shifts in the air, and the strange notes were all pulling me into some darker reality. Just as I was about to tell them what I found, a loud crash came from the room next to us. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. We all jumped, adrenaline kicking in. I glanced at my crew. They were wide-eyed and ready to bolt. "Stay here," I whispered, though I didn't feel very brave. I stepped towards the noise. The door swung open, creaking at the hinges, and my heart raced at what I might find. That's when I heard a whisper. "Get out." It was clear and chilling, sending fear coursing through me. I blinked, shaking my head in disbelief. Then, without thinking, I turned to run back to my crew. But when I turned around, the door slammed shut behind me. "Guys!" I shouted, panic flooding my veins. But there was only silence. I slammed my palm against the door, my heart pounding in my ears. "Let me out," I shouted, but it felt useless. My crew was still outside, oblivious to the rising dread inside me. I could hear muffled voices on the other side, but the words were blurred like they were underwater. I felt the air grow thick, choking me. I turned back to the room, scanning for a way out. The dim light barely illuminated the scattered tools and debris. The silence was almost oppressive. I noticed a vent in the corner, partially covered with cobwebs and dust. It seemed like my only chance. I approached it slowly, glancing back at the door. It remained shut, as if mocking my desperation. Climbing onto a box, I reached for the vent. My fingers brushed against the metal and I pulled it open. The narrow opening looked dark and unforgiving. Suddenly, the door behind me creaked open. I spun around, heart racing, only to find it wide and empty. My crew stood outside, but something was off. Their expressions were blank, almost like they were in a trance. "Guys, what happened?" I called out, desperation edging my voice. They didn't respond. They just stared at me, unblinking. Without thinking, I climbed into the vent, my breath shaking. I felt claustrophobic as I crawled through, the darkness enclosing around me. Each movement echoed in the stillness, heightening my anxiety. After a few moments, I reached another vent opening. I peeked down, hoping for a glimpse of my crew below. To my surprise, I spotted them in the main hallway. They seemed to be standing in a line, as if waiting for something. I scrunched my brow, confusion blending with fear. Something was definitely wrong. I called out again, but my voice barely made a sound in the confined space. Just then, I heard it, a low humming, vibrating through the walls. It felt alive, almost pulsating. I froze, overcome by a sudden sense of being watched. I swore I could feel eyes on me, even in the dark. It was then I noticed something shiny just ahead of me. Another toy. This one was a miniature construction worker, covered in dust, like it had been discarded long ago. I shivered as I remembered the robot and the note. I reached out and grabbed it, pulling it closer. The humming grew louder, almost insistent, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I had to get back to my crew. I could feel whatever was in this place ramping up, and it felt like it was about to explode. I crawled backward toward the vent opening, but when I reached it, I stopped. The hallway was empty, my crew was gone. I took a deep breath, panic settling in again. "Guys, where are you?" Nothing but silence answered me, heavy and foreboding. Then I heard it. Laughter, echoing from the depths of the warehouse. It was high-pitched and childlike, but laced with something sinister. This was beyond anything I'd ever encountered. My heart raced faster. I had to find them. I had to understand what was happening. In that moment, I realized I was no longer just afraid. I was furious. And that might have been my biggest mistake. I pushed myself back into the vent, my mind racing. The laughter echoed again, weaving through the shadows, twisting my thoughts. I ground my teeth, angry at the unfolding nightmare. I couldn't just sit back and let whatever this was take my crew. I crawled further into the vent, trying to stay quiet while the laughter ricocheted off the walls. The vent twisted and turned, but I pressed on, hoping to find an exit, or at least a clearer view of what was happening down below. Finally, I spotted another opening. It was larger than the last, and I could see into a well-lit room. Creeping closer, I peered down. My heart sank. There were no signs of my crew, but there were more toys, hundreds of them, arranged on shelves and tables. Each one seemed oddly lifelike, as if they could jump to life at any moment. I noticed one of the toys had a familiar shape. It was a little robot, very similar to the one I had found earlier, but this one was different. Its eyes glowed faintly as if lighting up with a conscious thought. I felt a chill wash over me. It looked like it was watching me. Before I could react, the door to the room swung open, and a figure stepped in. I barely caught a glimpse, but it was taller than me, wearing a dark overcoat that swallowed its body. I felt my blood run cold. It moved with a strange, jerky rhythm, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. I clamped my mouth shut, barely breathing. The figure scanned the room, and I caught a better look at its face. There was something unnerving about its features. Too smooth, no real expression, just a plastic mask that didn't fit the human form. Then another sound broke the silence. A faint beeping filled the air, echoing like a countdown. My stomach dropped. It had to be a warning. I had to get out of there, but how? I turned back to the vent to escape, but then hesitated. What about my crew? They needed me. The choice felt heavy, but I could almost hear their voices, pleading for help. I had to make a decision. I crawled back into the vent. The beeping grew louder, a relentless reminder that time was running out. I felt my anger stirring again. Enough was enough. I wouldn't let whatever that was take my friends. Just then the vent shuddered beneath me. I gripped the edges tightly as it jolted again, and the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air. My heart raced. I had to escape fast. That's when I saw it, a small hatch opening directly in front of me, leading down into another room. I had no other choice. I leaped through the opening just as the vent collapsed behind me. I landed hard on the floor, dust swirling around me like a storm. I scrambled to my feet, and as I looked up, I was met with a shocking sight. My crew stood just ahead, still in their trance, facing a wall covered with strange drawings, symbols that looked both familiar and foreign. I moved toward them, but the laughter rang out again, this time closer than before. Fear clawed at me. I had to wake them up. I had to uncover the truth behind these symbols before it was too late. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cold, hard surface. The air was heavy and stagnant. I blinked to clear my vision. My crew was still there, standing paralyzed before the wall of strange symbols. The laughter that haunted me echoed through the darkness, rattling my thoughts. I scrambled to my feet, my stomach twisting with dread. "Guys, wake up!" I shouted, but my voice was lost, swallowed by the emptiness around us. There was no response, just the rhythmic beeping still counting down somewhere nearby. Adrenaline surged through me as I closed the distance between us. I reached out and grabbed the nearest crew member, shaking him fiercely. "Carter, snap out of it!" His body was cold and unyielding, eyes glazed over like he wasn't even there. I let go, feeling a rush of panic. What was happening? I glanced back at the wall. The symbols illuminated by flickering lights pulsed, almost as if they were alive. Some of them looked like they were drawn in blood. Others resembled ancient runes from history books. My mind raced. What did they mean? Focus. Just focus, I muttered to myself as I strode back to where I had fallen. I spotted a small piece of paper on the floor, half buried under debris. I bent down, snatching it up. It was a tattered note covered in frantic scribbles. "Containment procedures," I read aloud. My heart hammered as I scanned the chaotic writing. There were lines about activation and rejection. It felt ominous. The words threatened to drown me in confusion. Suddenly, I heard movement behind me. I whipped around to see the dark figure standing at the entrance to the room. I stumbled back, barely suppressing a scream. It stepped forward, and I froze, caught between fight and flight. The laughter filled the air again, louder this time, harmonizing with a twisted melody. Entertain, engage, eliminate, it whispered, repeating a mantra that sent shivers down my spine. Panic flared within me. This thing was feeding on our fear. I looked at my unmoving crew again. "I won't let you take them," I screamed, charging toward the figure. But with every step the room seemed to stretch, conspiring against me. The walls felt like they were closing in, and then the lights flickered ominously. The symbols on the wall began to glow brighter, illuminating the form of the figure. Its plastic mask twisted into a smile, but it was wrong. A mocking grin that shouldn't belong to anything human. I stumbled back, my breath quickening. The figure raised one arm as if ready to point at me. "Join the fun," it intoned, a chilling echo that filled the space. I felt sick, rooted to the spot, watching as tendrils of darkness unfurled from its fingertips. Just then the beeping escalated into a frantic alarm. I darted toward my crew, desperate to pull them away from the mesmerizing glow. "Wake up, please, wake up!" I shouted again. I could feel the time slipping away. But before I could reach them, the figure lunged. I barely managed to dodge, diving to the side as the shadows threatened to engulf me entirely. A cold wave of dread washed over me. It was now or never. In that moment of desperation, I grabbed a nearby piece of debris and hurled it straight at the figure. "Get away from them!" The object struck the figure, its laughter morphing into a shrill screech. The room shook as the shadows recoiled. I sprinted toward my crew, grabbing Carter again, willing him to break the spell. Then the lights cut out, plunging us into darkness again. I could feel the figure lurking close, its presence heavy and oppressive. The laughter faded, but a new sound emerged, something low and guttural. It was getting closer. I had to act. My friends were still trapped, and I was running out of time. "Wake up, snap out of it," I screamed into the void, my desperation echoing off the walls, and each heartbeat screamed back, too late. The darkness felt like a living thing, wrapping around me. My pulse raced as I strained to hear anything over the low growl that echoed through the room. I had to keep moving. No time to panic. "Carter!" I shouted again, shaking him harder this time. His face was pale and waxy, just a mask of the person I had known. "Please, you've got to wake up." The beeping alarm became a chaotic symphony, pushing me to the edge. I could feel something in the air. It was charged, like the calm before a storm. I glanced back at the wall, desperate for answers. The symbols had shifted somehow, forming a new pattern. They pulsed rhythmically, drawing my gaze. As I stared, the ground trembled beneath my feet. A deep crack formed in the earth, racing toward me. My heart dropped. "No, no, no!" I yelled, scrambling back. This wasn't a nightmare. It was happening. I needed to get my crew and escape. Frantically, I searched for anything. A tool, a weapon, something that could help me break the spell over my crew. That's when I noticed a faint flickering light to my right. It was a faint glow, cutting through the shadows. I ran toward it, leaving my friends for a moment, praying they wouldn't be lost forever. As I approached, I discovered an old lantern half buried in rubble. I flipped the switch, and the light burst forth, illuminating the darkness around me. The glow felt like a distant lifeline, but also drew attention. I needed to be cautious. I could feel the figure lurking in the shadows, waiting. With the lantern in one hand, I returned to Carter, my resolve hardening. "I won't leave you," I whispered fiercely. I raised the lantern, hoping the light would break through whatever spell bound him. Nothing happened. The shadows seemed to pulse in response, as if taunting me. I looked around, breathless. There had to be something here that could help. I felt the floor shift beneath me again. I had to hurry. I glanced at the lantern's beam and spotted something glimmering near the wall. I stumbled closer, the laughter coming alive again, surrounding me, mocking my efforts. "Damn it," I muttered, shaking my head to clear it. I needed to focus. As I reached out for the glimmer, I saw it, a small metallic piece, covered in dust and grime. I pulled it from the ground, revealing a crude key. Perhaps it was what I needed to unlock my crew, or whatever door led out of this nightmare. I pocketed the key and returned to my friends, fighting back the dread that threatened to consume me. Suddenly, the guttural sound grew louder. It was closer than before. I turned and saw the figure emerging, shadowy tendrils reaching out toward me, stretching like claws. It was no longer just observing. It was coming for me. "Get away!" I screamed, swinging the lantern wildly. The light pushed back the darkness, forcing the creature to recoil. In that moment, clarity washed over me. I had to find a way to break the hold on my crew. Carter's eyes fluttered just for a second. I could see fragments of recognition. "Keep fighting, buddy. Stay with me." But then I felt a rush of coldness. The figure began to laugh again, more sinister now, drowning out my cries. "Your reality is ours," it taunted, as shadows enveloped the lantern's light. I had to make my choice. Do I keep trying to save my friends, or fight off this nightmare that wanted to pull us into the abyss? I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever it would take. But before I could act, the lights flickered once more, and the world spun around me, pulling everything into a vortex of darkness. I could only wonder if this was the end or the beginning of something worse. The darkness twisted and swirled, and I felt my stomach drop. My senses were on overload. The shadows clawed at me, whispering secrets I was too afraid to understand. Suddenly, everything went still. The growling faded, leaving a deafening silence that pressed against my eardrums. I blinked, trying to adjust to the change. My heart was still racing, but I felt different. A strange calm settled over me, almost as if the storm had passed. But that calm was shattered by a terrifying realization. I was no longer in the same room. I had been transported somewhere else. The walls were gone, replaced by towering trees that loomed overhead. Moonlight trickled through the leaves, casting eerie shadows on the ground. A chill ran down my spine. "Carter," I called out, fear creeping back in. Panic twisted in my gut as I spun around, searching for any sign of my crew. There was nothing, just the chilling rustle of leaves in the wind. I took a step forward, then stumbled over something. I yelled, scrambling back. A patch of dirt shifted underfoot, revealing a bone. A small, weathered bone, jagged and stained. My breath hitched. Where was I? What had happened? The moment of shock gave way to urgency. I had to find Carter. I had to find my crew. I stood up and fixated on the lantern still clutched in my hand. The light felt weaker now, flickering as if it could barely hold on to life. "Stay strong," I urged myself, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "You can do this." As I moved through the underbrush, the trees seemed to loom closer, their branches twisting like fingers. I could almost hear whispers, soft and insistent, urging me deeper into the darkness. But I couldn't let them win. I had to focus on finding my friends. That's when I heard it. A rustling sound, distinct from the natural ambiance of the forest. I turned, heart racing again. A figure was emerging behind a tree, cloaked in shadows but unmistakably human. "Carter?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure hesitated, then stepped into the light. It wasn't Carter. It was someone else entirely, a woman with dark hair that fell tangled around her face. She looked just as lost as I felt. "Who are you?" I demanded, gripping the lantern tighter. "Where am I?" she replied, her voice shaky. I was working and then—" "Same," I interrupted, trying to steady my nerves. "We need to find my friend and get out of here." Before she could respond, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a storm. The shadows grew darker, reaching out, and suddenly the horror of being trapped here suffocated me. Finding her felt like a mistake, but I had no choice. I needed help. "Do you know how to break whatever this is?" I asked, desperation seeping into my words. She shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, but I've seen things. Things that don't make sense." Before I could ask what she meant, a chilling laugh echoed from the shadows, reverberating off the trees. "You cannot escape," it taunted, and I felt the darkness encroaching again. Racing back, I pulled her with me. "We have to go now." But just as we began to move, the ground shifted again, and a cold breath slithered past us. The darkness was hungry, and this time it was going to feast. I pulled the woman, whose name I still didn't know, deeper into the forest. The sounds of the night seemed to conspire against us, a cacophony of rustling leaves and distant howls that made my skin crawl. "We need to stay quiet," I whispered, glancing back at her to gauge her reaction. She looked terrified but nodded, her expression set in grim determination. Just ahead, the trees parted slightly, revealing a narrow path. I hesitated for a second but pushed forward. The lantern's feeble glow barely illuminated the ground in front of me, but I could make out the way ahead. That's when I noticed it. A shape lying just off the path. I stopped dead in my tracks. "What is that?" I murmured, instinctively stepping closer to the shadows. As I neared, the light from the lantern flickered violently, casting eerie patterns in the air. My heart was pounding. "It looks like a helmet?" It was indeed a helmet, but not just any helmet. It was dented and caked in what looked like dried mud or possibly something worse. I knelt down, heart racing, and the woman squinted at it from behind me. "Do you think someone was—" "Maybe," I interrupted, just as a thought struck me. "What if this belongs to Carter or one of the crew?" I grasped the helmet gingerly, flipping it over to see if there was any identifying mark. "Wait," she warned, suddenly pulling back. "What if it's cursed or something?" I shot her a frustrated look. "Great time for that," I snapped, my patience running thin. I wanted to shout for Carter, but I couldn't risk it. I needed logic to cut through the panic. I set the helmet back down. "Focus, we need to keep moving." Then I heard it again, the laughter reverberating in the darkness. It was closer this time, and I felt a jolt of terror shoot through me. "We have to go, now," I urged, stepping back onto the path. As the woman hurried to catch up, something tugged at my wrist. Instinctively, I jerked away. But it wasn't a branch or a root. It was a twisted vine, impossibly thick, coiling against my arm like a snake. "What the—" I gasped, trying to pull free, but the vine tightened. "Don't fight it, just stay still," she shouted, her voice tinged with panic. I could feel the shadows closing in around us, thick and suffocating, as she reached down to grab the lantern from my hand. The moment she touched it, the light flared bright, illuminating the surroundings in a blinding glow. The vine recoiled, retreating back into the darkness, as if burned by the light. I gasped, staring at her in shock. "How did you do that?" "I don't know," she panted, breathless. "But we have to keep moving." We strained against our fear, sprinting down the path. But then everything seemed to change again. The ground shook violently, and I stumbled, nearly falling. "It's an earthquake," I yelled, but as I glanced up, the trees warped and twisted as if they were alive. "No, this is not normal," she shouted, eyes wide with terror. And that's when I saw it. A figure, barely visible in the darkness, its glowing eyes fixed on us. "You cannot escape," it rasped, the voice dripping with malice. Panic surged through me again, but it was different this time. It felt like a jolt of adrenaline. We could be trapped, but we weren't defeated. I made eye contact with the woman, and in that moment, I knew we had to fight our way out. We took off again, our desperation pushing us forward, but the figure followed, its laughter echoing behind us, growing louder. Then, just as it seemed we'd break free, the path twisted sharply. A massive stone wall rose from the ground, blocking our escape. "No! No!" I screamed, slamming my hands against the wall. Then I realized. The darkness wasn't just surrounding us. It was changing, and I had no idea if we could survive this. I stared at the stone wall, panic rising in my throat. "What do we do now?" I shouted, feeling hopelessness seep into my bones. Just seconds ago we were running for our lives, and now we were trapped. The laughter of the figure behind us echoed, sending shivers down my spine. "We have to find another way," the woman cried, frantically scanning the shadows. "And if there isn't one?" I retorted, my voice rising. I clutched the lantern tighter, its light flickering like our hope. But a corner of my mind sparked with something odd. "Wait," I said, lowering my voice. "Are you sure that's the only way?" She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "Maybe it's not a wall, but an illusion. The forest has done some weird things already." Before she could respond, I stepped closer, testing the surface of the stone. It felt solid, but it was cold. A feeling tugged at my gut, something primal. I closed my eyes for a moment and focused, letting the chaos recede into the background. I could still hear laughter, but it was distant now, muffled. "Do you feel that?" I whispered. "What?" she asked, eyes darting around. It's like there's something underneath the surface," I said, placing my palm against the stone. "Something reacting to us." She hesitated but stepped forward, touching the wall beside me. Her eyes widened. "You're right. It feels alive." I turned then to face the darkness surrounding us. Whatever created this wall must have weaknesses. We just need to find them. "Like seeking a pulse?" she asked, fear and determination intertwining in her voice. "Exactly." We closed our eyes and I let my instincts take over. I could almost sense the heartbeat of the forest around us, the way it pulsed with energy. In that moment, I felt it, a faint vibration beneath the stone. "Try here," I exclaimed, pressing down harder. I could feel the energy surge as we pressed together. The lantern flickered violently, the light catching strange shapes moving in the shadows. The laughter grew louder again, more menacing, but I pushed through it, focusing on the pulse beneath our fingers. Then with a sudden crack the stone trembled. An opening began to form, a dark void creeping through the wall like a mouth slowly readying to swallow us. A surge of wind swept from the new passage, rattling our bones and carrying the smell of something foul. "Go," I shouted, grabbing her hand. "Don't look back." We stumbled through the opening as it widened, the laughter now a deafening roar behind us. The moment we passed through, the wall sealed shut with a final thud, cutting off the sound. The forest opened up into a clearing, and for a brief moment, we felt safe. But a new danger loomed. In front of us lay an old construction site, eerie and abandoned, like something out of a nightmare. The skeletal framework of a building loomed above us, and the air crackled with tension. "What is this place?" she whispered, eyes darting around as if the shadows were alive. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we should be careful." And just then, I spotted something glinting on the ground, half buried in the dirt. I took a step toward it, curiosity piqued, but I felt a shiver run down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. "Wait," she said, grabbing my arm. "We have to be smart about this." I looked at the glinting object again, heart pounding. It was missing pieces, but it was still recognizable. A helmet, like the one I'd seen before. That's when I saw it. Something or someone was moving inside the building. I froze, my pulse quickening as I glanced up at the partially constructed structure. The shadows shifted around it like a leviathan stirring beneath calm waters. The sight of the helmet sent a wave of dread crashing over me. It felt like a connection to what had been lost, to my crew, to Carter. "What if they're inside?" the woman insisted, her voice quivering with fear. "I don't know. But we can't leave without finding out," I replied, my resolve settling as adrenaline surged through me again. We moved cautiously toward the building, shadows clinging to us like cobwebs as we approached the entrance. The air was cold and stale, stinging my lungs when I breathed. "Stay close," I whispered, the crunch of gravel beneath our feet sounding like thunder. As we stepped inside, the dim light from the lantern exposed remnants of old machinery and piles of debris scattered throughout. The silence was suffocating. I strained to listen for any signs of movement. Then a sound echoed, a faint whisper, too soft to make out. "Did you hear that?" I asked, adrenaline pumping in my veins. The woman nodded, eyes wide, gripping my arm tightly. Together, we edged deeper into the gloom. I led the way, peering into the dark corners and dodging rusted tools. The walls felt alive as I pressed forward, as if the structure itself tried to warn me. Just as I turned the corner, I saw a flash of movement, a figure darting away from the beam of light. "Carter?" I called out, hope rising in my chest. There was no reply, just the echo of my own voice bouncing back at me. I hesitated, looking back at the woman. What if it's a trap? Then we have to deal with it together. We can't abandon him, she insisted, her determination igniting a fire in my gut. Taking a deep breath, I pressed on. We weaved through narrow hallways, the mismatched noise of our footfalls against old, creaky floorboards sounding like thunder in the eerie stillness. I could sense something dark lurking just behind us. The feeling of being watched never left. As we moved into a larger room, the shadows seemed to pull back momentarily, revealing a group of toys lined up against the far wall. They were eerily lifelike, just like the ones I had seen before. The robot, the doll. My stomach twisted. "This place is twisted," I murmured, heart racing. Then I saw it, a faint glow emitting from the center of the room. It pulsed rhythmically, casting an unsettling light across the debris. We approached cautiously, but suddenly a loud crash erupted from behind us. The door slammed shut, sealing us inside. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing her wrist and pulling her toward the glow. We crossed the room, but just as we reached the light, everything changed again. The glow intensified, illuminating the symbols from the wall in the forest, swirling and shifting. They seemed to be forming a pattern, a warning of sorts. In the chaos, I caught sight of figures trapped in the half-light, the faces of my crew, including Carter, blank and lifeless as they were bound to old metal frameworks. My heart sank. "Carter!" I screamed, desperate. Their eyes opened, staring blankly past me, and the whispers returned, ringing in my ears, drowning out everything else. The figure from the shadows materialized, its plastic mask grinning wickedly. "You've come to play," it hissed. My blood ran cold. "Get away from them!" I shouted, brandishing the lantern, but the glow seemed ineffective against the darkness that surrounded us. "You cannot save them," the figure taunted, extending its arm, darkness curling around its fingers. It moved toward my crew, and terror seized me. I lunged forward, instinctively throwing myself in front of Carter. "No!" A tendril wrapped around my leg, pulling me down. I fought against it, my hands desperate to free myself. But as I did, the shadows coiled tighter, whispering words I couldn't understand. The woman stepped forward, positioning herself beside me. "Together!" she urged, her eyes defiant as she raised the lantern high, letting its light shine boldly. It flickered, but with a sudden surge, the glow intensified, and the tendrils recoiled. "Hold him!" she cried, and together we pressed against the darkness, pushing towards the figures of my crew. The symbols around us began to pulse violently, like a heart struggling against its chains. The figure howled in rage, shadows splintering, and for the first time I saw despair flicker across its expression. "You cannot break the bond," it screeched, but I wasn't listening. "Carter! Fight back!" I shouted at my friend, willing him to hear me. Then something magical happened. The ground trembled beneath us as Carter's eyes finally flickered with life. What's happening?" he murmured, confused. I felt a surge of hope as the darkness began to wane. "You're not alone, we're here," I promised, and I knew my words reached him. With renewed determination, he reached out and gripped my arm. "Together," he said with fierce resolve, as the shadows hissed and writhed around us. In that moment we all came alive. The figures of my crew began to move, shaking off the shackles of darkness. The room erupted into chaos as they fought the shadows, and the air turned electric. The figure trembled, panic evident on its face as the symbols fell into a frenzied dance, resonating with our united strength. It screeched again, the sound echoing hauntingly, and then with one last burst of light, the shadows collapsed like a deflating balloon, freeing us all. I looked around, breathless. My crew was back and the darkness retreated, collapsing into a corner of the room. But the victory felt fragile, and I couldn't shake the sensation of lingering eyes watching us from the edges. "What just happened?" Carter asked, dazed. "I'm not sure," I admitted, my heart still racing, "but I know we need to get out of here." The woman looked at me. "And what about that?" She gestured toward the shadows, now boiling in a corner like they were seeking revenge. "I don't know if we can ever truly escape," I admitted, feeling a chill creep over me. The air still felt heavy with something unnameable, a sense of dread that came from deep within the walls. As we stumbled back toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever that figure was, it hadn't lost completely. The building might be empty, but something still lingered. Once outside, I breathed in the cold night air, almost dizzy with relief. But as I turned back to face the warehouse one last time, I noticed something in the window. A flicker of light, then nothing. It sent an involuntary shiver through me. The mysteries of that place hung heavy in my heart. I still didn't know the full story, what had been awakened, what influence still haunted the site. "Let's get away from here," I said, urging my crew to move forward. The road ahead felt uncertain, but at least we were alive, together. Yet even as we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes of that place would follow. I couldn't know if what we'd faced was real or if it was simply a manifestation of something deeper, a darkness rooted within our own fears. All I knew was that it wasn't over, not completely. As we drove away, I glanced into the rearview mirror, catching just a glint of something unnatural in the shadows before it faded into the night. For now, we had escaped. But the questions lingered. What had really happened inside that abandoned warehouse, and would it ever truly let us go?